Okay, welcome back. Some more conversation. Talk is cheap. As you know, we left off talking about this whole conversation about healthcare in America. Socialized, universal healthcare. It's outrageous, this conversation, because we have been having this conversation for years. And recently we decided as a crew here at Talk is Cheap Radio, we were going to watch a video that we had never considered watching before, but Michael Moore's Sicko. Now, I am the first to tell you that Michael Moore definitely has an axe to grind. Melissa, are you with me on this?
Yes.
Okay. It is clear that his presentations, his movies definitely have a slant that doesn't sit well with a lot of people. So I just looked past the slant and I had to just look at the facts that were being delivered. So Melissa, when you were watching that, barring, removing his presentation and his snark and his personality, what jumped out at you right away about that?
It was the outward focusedness of other countries in regards to their fellow, their fellow
citizens?
beings and citizens, yeah.
So what you're saying is when you were watching it, because I remember there was a gentleman from Canada who was talking about it, who just seemed so shocked that we would even not get this idea that, well, of course we are here to support and take care of our fellow citizens and show up where they are not able to show up. And, it's interesting to hear the conversation with the pundits and what have you talk about socialism and all these crazy conversations. And yet, what is so bad about caring about another person? Mm-hmm. What's so terrible about the fact that, if you're in pain, look at how we jumped to our feet for Haiti, or for tsunami victims, or for 9/11. How we jump to our feet to serve those victims of those catastrophes, only to turn around with something like 9/11 and be, okay, we're done with that. And now years later, those people are still not cared for.
Yeah.
Because we have no infrastructure of health services to support them. They are coughing themselves to death from particulates in the air and what have you. And I'll tell you what was the most ridiculous part of that whole conversation about healthcare is that American citizens went to a foreign country. No questions asked. They were handed healthcare. Mm-hmm. They were handed the coverage. And for me, this conversation about universal healthcare has nothing to do with socialism, taxes, nothing. It has to do with, are we willing to step outside ourselves and really be outward focused?
And something that really struck me was that woman that had almost lost her, she's a single mother of 2 kids, almost lost her house, all this stuff, because she had this incredibly expensive medication that she had to buy every month because, of course, her insurance wouldn't cover it because she thought outside of herself and assisted people out of the rubble of 9/11. And she goes there to Cuba and buys the medication for 5 cents.
It's outrageous.
When she was spending hundreds of dollars a month, and it had turned her whole life upside down trying to pay for this medication, and she could buy garbage bags full of it.
I know. It is crazy. And even more so, we're willing to subsidize the fire department, the police department, the schools, all of these entities to be outward focused in service to the community. And in this one way, Americans have been duped. We have been tricked into thinking that if this is the last bastion of democracy, if we do this, we are a socialist country. Well, I say garbage. Mm-hmm. That is bull. If you truly believe this is the greatest country on earth, wouldn't the greatest country on earth care for every one of its citizens, support and care for them, and give them the health and services they deserve? It's outrageous.
We had one of our listeners today ask me, said, well, how did these other countries pay for their health care? Wasn't it through taxes? I said, of course it's through taxes. She said, so what? They're just taxed heavily?
Well, we're taxed with our health bills.
We're absolutely taxed.
Look, we got to continue this conversation on the other side of the break. We'll be right back. Okay, Melissa, what were you saying just before we went to break?
So what I was saying is that, of course we have these high taxes and they have these extremely high taxes. And she was saying, well, didn't you guys do a show about not wanting to be taxed so heavily and talking about, if the government just left us to our own devices and let us spend our own money, what would we do with it then? I said, well, of course we did that. But that has to do with the government actually knowing what we want and being committed to be outward focused. If my government is truly going to do with my money what serves the highest good, I'm more than happy to let them, to give it to them and let them divvy it out and do what serves.
It's so true. But and even the argument about higher taxes in other countries doesn't make any sense, because that tells me that someone hasn't done the math on healthcare. Because here in this country, we pay between 20 and 30% in taxes no matter what. Now, if you're under the poverty line, that's a different story. But most Americans are paying between 20 and 30% just in taxes, which doesn't include their healthcare expenses. Then you've got your added insurance costs and your healthcare. And God forbid anything come up. When all's said and done and you add it up at the end of the year, Americans with taxes and healthcare are paying almost more than 50% of their income. Okay? There's very few countries, and I'm open to saying none, that are higher than 50% or 52%, I think is the highest that I've heard of. So the argument of higher taxes for healthcare, that's garbage. Because it's very likely mathematically we as Americans would pay less overall with universal health care than and pay it out of our taxes than to pay it out of our pocket. So we'll be right back with more Talk is Cheap after this.